So to what degree then has that sort of impacted our drug policy today? And maybe one for Ben, particularly to cannabis. What sort of influences are at play at the moment and have been to sort of get us to this point?
So I think it's important to remember two things. One is that lobbying are tools that can be used by larger companies as they can be used by civil society or public interest foundations and so on and so on. It's a political game in a sense that you need to use specific techniques, knowledge, expertise in order to be on par with what is going on in other places where they do the lobbying. So when you have conflicting interests, you need to be on par in terms of what can be used, but you do that in a transparent manner, and you do that for explicit values and objectives, which just show that there are different sides to what we call lobbying, which is influence, and you can influence in many different sides. But obviously, the second most important thing to remember is that lobbying, whether in especially in cannabis or in drug policy, doesn't evolve in a vacuum. It's linked to how it's being done, right? With the conflicted actions of influence from private interests that can be existing because of the side of transnational, transnational corporations, and their impact on decision-making processes at different level, especially at the EU. So you have a lot of things that are going on, obviously, and that's how our laws are made. So the idea is really to know how it's happening, what are the people, what are the processes, and how you can engage into it. That's where people like Christophe come into play. And myself, before getting into the cannabis business side, I was much more into the drug policy reform and the influence. And I did a lot of, I would say, citizen lobbying, where we would be, working at different level with academics, but also people on workshop on the ground, the local level, and try to bring up public policy reform proposals from the ground up. And it's very complicated because this takes money, in a sense that you need to have people working for you and do the work properly, professionally. So this has a minimum cost. And when you don't have that, which is the case for most drug policy reform and cannabis reform movements, it's crucial. It's something that if you don't have this, you can have all the volunteer in the world, the will in the world, and all the passion and all the courage and energy. At one point, you're going to run out. And that's one of the things that I'm trying as a consultant now and a CEO in this industry to really try to bring, create gaps and bridges in between the industry and the civil society, as to channel funds in order to fund what is actually, militants and activists creating bigger market shares for companies in the industry, very, in a very cynical manner. And for that reason only, if it's not for anything else, that should be a high incentive for companies to take their part and not be what I call affectionately, clandestine passengers, with the intent to understand that cannabis is not like any other goods, and that you need to take into account certain things. So the impact on individual and communities. And this is, for me, I think, the two very important things that you have to take into account for lobbying, is that you need to know the rules, you need to have the means to back it up, and you need to work with different kind of people for common objectives, and this take time, preparations, and financial means.
If I might jump in with a quick example Something that happened with the cannabis industry, especially the medical cannabis industry, was the role played by the medical industry in general, big pharma, right? So at first, their stance was pretty dismissive, if not hostile towards medical cannabis. They said it would harm their business model, destroy jobs. That's good, not good for the economy, obviously. And they said it was harmful for the consumers as well, because cannabis is dangerous. Meanwhile, they were selling pain medication that was based on opiates. We don't have much of an issue with it in Europe, but in the US, there's been something that's been called an epidemic, and it's reached proportions that are crazy. We even lost quite a few of our, favorite musicians to it at some point. So their stance, how it changed, could be argued why. Possibly because they thought it was inevitable, possibly because they understood that there was money to be made in medical cannabis. But now they're pushing for reform. But they are pushing for a certain type of reform that suits them best. And this is where the people should be vigilant to some extent. Another good example of action or reform and the right type of lobbying, I'd say, is we've been working with several police groups who have first-hand experience in, dealing with drug addicts and black markets and, and criminality that goes with them. One especially called LEAP. I've been working somewhat with LEAP Europe. They're good friends of Benjamin, and he introduced me to them. And what they do is admirable. They contribute their experience and their knowledge, and that underlines how current policies are inefficient. And that's a very useful tool to leverage when we go and meet MPs, MEPs, whichever, and help them understand what are the weaknesses of the current system and why the status quo does not work.